everyone, and welcome to North 100, a Canadian Highlander podcast. I'm Serge. As always, I have Jer, Alex, and Liam. A reminder, this podcast is brought to you by you with your support over at the Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. All right, let's get started. As we always get started, it's the best card you're not playing, and up to date, Alex, tell me your secrets.
There's a piece of equipment in our format that costs 2 and equips for 2.
Is it GT?
It's not.
What? All right.
It's...
Well, it's a card you're not playing. So.
Yeah. Well, like, what else is there? Okay.
We're talking about Runechanter's Pike.
Oh, baby. Oh, yeah.
Which is maybe like the best dollar you're ever going to spend on a piece of equipment. This is 2... Okay.
I just didn't have the heart to break it to you. It's not $1 anymore.
Is it, oh, people know about this card, maybe. Well, anyways, it casts for 2, equips for 2. It's equipment. Equipped creature gets first strike and gets +X/+O, where X is the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Is it Blitz? Loves this card.
Yeah.
It hits very, very hard. And ordinarily, equipment of this type would be buffing power and toughness, but because it grants first strike, the toughness increase is less relevant. And you can get really outrageously huge.
Very swole.
Just like off cantrips or burn spells or counters or what have you. You throw this on a creature with evasion, you just crack in and kill them to death.
Truly, you hoist them.
You just hoist them.
Hoisted on their own pike. I love that in a format where you can play Umezawa's GT, sort of Fire and Ice, Batter Skull, these like really, really, really top tier equipment. That something like Runechanter's Pike is just like...
It's good.
Isn't this the only equipment that something like Flying Man plays, like the blue flyers? They don't even
play
care about their
Grafted
gear.
War Gear.
Oh, Grafted War Gear as well?
Mask of Memory as well.
Sometimes Bone Splitter, but yeah, Runechanter's Pike is sweet. It's a little bit of a build around if you're not playing a deck that has, I mean, I want to say almost like half spells, or like...
This is a deck that wants to be with Thought Scour, those sorts of self-mill effects.
Yeah, that's pretty spicy. But like, you have to have enough creatures that you'll be able to reliably equip it to something, but also enough spells to make it good. So, like I said, is it Blitz?
Yeah, Jared, do you play this in a deck with Delve, or do they fight with each other? Because typically you want to fuel your own graveyard.
You don't usually want to play it with too many Delve things, because
you're probably still playing Cruise though, because Cruise is nuts, right?
You can play Cruise and maybe Dig Through Time, but that's probably about it for a Runechanter's Pike deck.
Cool. Very cool.
I just want to cut in real quick. Sorry, just to address something that you guys were talking about. This is sort of the difference between Highlander being a local meta or not. Because what's Runechanter's Pike up to price-wise now?
I don't know.
Locally? Okay, because online it's TCG mid price is 40 cents.
Oh.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Go get a copy.
I guess it's more valuable locally.
You're gonna kill him.
Around here, it's a couple bucks at
Gonna
least.
kill him.
Yeah, sweet. Anyways, get it in your decks if that's the right home for it. Let us talk about today's theme. Today we wanted to talk about a lovely and sometimes overlooked color combination, Selesnya, green-white, the color known for creatures? I mean, we talk so often about how dominant blue can be in the format, and these control decks, and these combo decks, and these like degenerate decks, and like, let's just talk about turning creatures sideways, and a lot of the different ways you can do it. And I'm excited to get back to sort of this early concept that we talked about for a while of let's talk about X. So yeah, let's start off with good old-fashioned aggro. Jer, what does a Selesnya aggro deck look like?
So you're playing. There's basically 2 ways you can build it. You can either play the 2-power 1-drops in white and green. There's more in white than in green, but there's a couple in green, getting a little better. Or you can play the mana dorks and really try to just like get to your 3 and 4 drops as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Like your plan is to go like 1-drop accelerant, which includes Moxes.
Yeah.
And you have all the dorks like Llanowar Elves, Birds of Paradise, Noble Hierarch, the other Llanowar Elves, so on and so forth. And then just try to jam 3 drops, or you can play the 2-power 1-drops like Kytheon, like we talked about in the 1-drop episode, the nuts and bolts episode, the 2-power white 1-drops, and then there's also the 2-power green ones, and you get some secret ones like Sunblade Elf, Wild Nacatl, or secret green 2-power 1-drops in this deck.
Don't tell him.
Jungle Lion.
Jungle Lion
Cannot intercept.
It's never been able to intercept.
It's not an
The worst defensive back in Magic.
Do you know Janine Johnson is local?
No,
She illustrated Jungle Lion.
I didn't even know that.
There you go. And you often see the 2 and 3 drops in this deck being hate bears, meaning
Yeah.
creatures that will negatively impact how your opponent tries to play. Like, I've been increasingly losing to turn 2 Thalia Heretic Cathar.
Oh, that card's really
I
good.
actually think it might be like one of the most powerful turn 2 plays in our format.
Let's
It's
talk
just
about Thalia really quickly. Which one does this one do?
this
Because
is
there's 2 Thalias, right?
yeah, this is the newer one from Eldritch Moon.
The one that
It's
didn't get eaten.
It's 2 and a white for a legendary human soldier. It's a 3/2 with first strike, and it says creatures and non-basic lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped.
Ow.
So if you play this on turn 2, chances are your opponent doesn't have anything in play,
Yeah.
and their next land is coming into play tapped. They probably can't play a creature. You get to untap, maybe play a 4-drop. Then chances are they maybe get to play a 2-drop, but they're probably just too far behind at this point to
Yeah,
Yeah,
this new
it
Thalias
just sort
are
of
really
like
good.
do anything.
breaks your opponent one-sidedly in
Yeah.
a really
The
devastating way.
fact
It
that this
also-
is non-symmetrical is so
Yeah.
devastating.
It
Oh,
also, sorry, I was just gonna say that like, it shuts off a couple of little, maybe sort of corner casey things. Like you can't win with Kiki Pestermite with this in play.
You can.
Can you?
You just end
Yeah.
step
oh, okay.
because it says they go away at the beginning of the next end step, so it slows them a turn down. But they just on your end step, they'll make all their Pestermites,
you can
and then
see
they
it
get
coming.
to untap with them, and then they bash you for 1,000,000.
You're still dead.
Yeah. medium dead, though. Anything else you want to add, sort of the concept of aggro and Selesnya?
So one of the most sort of hallmarky cards in the Selesnya aggro deck is, especially the one with mana dorks, is Armageddon and Ravages of War.
yeah.
Those are sort of the most devastating cards in this deck, and I actually think this is the single best shell to play these cards in, because you get access to the 2 Moxes, and you often have mana dorks in your deck, so you're often able to A, get them out really quickly and under counter magic, and B, like you have the threats
You have a board state.
to back them up, and you also have like the leftover mana production from Moxes
Yeah.
and
Making-
mana dorks to recover.
Making Ravages of War or Armageddon non-symmetrical is pretty savage.
You know,
Ravaging even.
Yeah.
As the reminder text on the version I have on screen from Portal 3 Kingdoms reminds you, is destroy all lands. This includes your land.
Well, it was a beginner's set.
Yeah.
So this is probably one of the, like between aggro and mid-range, one of the more classic ways that you'd encounter this. And I want to shift the conversation now, in hate bears. But what are sort of the classic cards that we'd see in this? I mean, Jared did a great example of talking about fast mana, elves, maybe some hate bears, and get up to ravages. But if you were to build this deck, let's start with Liam on the side. What do you think would be auto includes? What cards typify this deck?
Yeah, so I mean, the Thalias are maybe the first place you'd start. I also think of like Brimaz, King of Ereska. This is a
Yep.
card that's quite powerful in this deck. When you're talking about green-white cards, cards like Voice of Resurgence and Loxodon Smiter are really powerful, especially against the blue decks. So those are particularly nice carrots that draw you to playing this archetype.
Carrots, you say?
Yeah. And then
As
like
opposed
you
to
dangle,
sticks.
you dangle them in front of you, and you walk towards the archetype.
What sort of curve are we expecting on the aggro mid-range version?
You have a high density of ones almost no matter what.
Yeah.
Whether if you're playing the sort of like 2/1s for 1, then your density of ones is even higher. If you're just playing the mana dorks, you oftentimes will not play very many of the 2 mana 1-drops or 1 mana 2/1s. Sorry, because you'll instead want to have almost all of your game plans involve going 1/3.
Yeah, I love the old skip the 2. Your 1/2 drop might be Stoneforge Mystic or something like the really high value Scavenging Ooze or something.
And in both builds of the deck, in fact, the 2-drop slot is often a little less full than you might typically expect, and the 3-drop
Your curve just.
a little bit, not some super drastic thing, but just like when you're playing with Mox and you're incentivized to try and create as many nut draw opportunities as possible, and playing powerful 3-drops does that. The other card that I think that doesn't get played all that often, and this is a really nice shell for it, is Wiltleaf Liege.
Oh yeah! Oh
It's
yeah!
like the little kid green-white special. And yeah, so like this card's really powerful. It's especially powerful against my least favorite card in the history of Magic, Liliana of the Veil. So I'm a big fan of this card, flooping it into play when they Liliana you feels about as good as anything.
What is the text on this card for the listeners?
So Wiltleaf Liege is a 1
Selesnya
green white,
hybrid,
green white,
yeah.
green white. So 4 cost, and 3 of it is green white hybrid. Elf Knight, that's a 4/4 that says other green creatures get +1/+1, you control, sorry. And other white creatures you control get +1/+1. And if a spell or ability an opponent controls causes you to discard Wiltleaf Liege, put it onto the battlefield instead of putting it into your graveyard.
It's nuts.
It's very good, and one thing that's kind of interesting about these kinds of abilities that is not necessarily intuitive is you can't even get them with things like Scavenging Ooze or Deathrite Shaman, because it's instead of going into the graveyard.
It's a replacement effect.
So it just pops right into play.
Same.
So that's kind of a neat thing.
Ooh-wee.
I've seen sort of 2 ways to build this deck. I've seen one where the only 4 drops in the whole deck are Ravages, Armageddon, and like Elspeth. That's it. But with a lot of the new really powerful printings they've had, like the new 4-mana Chad is really strong. Sorry, what's that Gideon called?
Ally of Zendikar.
Gideon Ally of Zendikar at 4 mana is really strong there, and they've started to put like more and more really aggressively costed creatures at 4. You're starting to see that, this is where we start fudging that line between aggro and mid-range, and like where does your deck want to go?
Play Garruk Relentless in this kind of deck.
I don't really like Garruk in aggro decks, just because, like, it's not actually that good of an aggressive card. I think the only decks that really want to play Garruk are the decks that can take advantage of his tutor effect on the
Creature
backside.
tutor,
So typically creature combo decks are the decks you really want Garruk Relentless. Like, just turning out wolves is fine, but it's not actually that threatening to your opponent.
No, and I'd rather play a card like Master of the Wild Hunt if you just were interested in a wolf churner.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just body value, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't play that.
There's one card that doesn't fit necessarily in any of the archetypes, but one of the cards that I think you get to snap play in Selesnya super, super, super easily is Krakus.
Yeah.
Like, that card's so good in the format, and to a deck that naturally wants to play that, because so many of your own threats are going to be legendary creatures. Like we talked about Thalias, we talked about Brimaz, and the ability to use Krakus defensively to protect your own creatures from removal and stuff like that is really, really strong.
You can probably slide a Ganjo Castle in here
I was
as well.
just going to say the same thing. I think this is actually one of the best opportunities to play a Ganjo Castle, and you get so many people just because they're not used to playing around it.
What's the castle?
It's a land. It comes into play untapped, taps for white, and you can pay a white and tap it to prevent the next 2 damage that would be dealt to target legendary creature this turn.
It is really neat value stuff. And of course, in Selesnya, you have access to Knight of the Reliquary to get you a lot of those value lands. And I think that's a card that can fit into maybe not so much in the aggro shell, but
I don't think I would play Knight in the aggro version.
I still would. I think you're just like so rewarded for, because I think the spread I like playing is 2 Moxes, Strip Mine, Jite, and just like getting to Strip Mine your opponent as many times as possible is really good. And even in the aggressive version, I think that like another card that you can play is Renegade Rallier,
Definitely.
which is another one of these premier sort of like Selesnya colored cards. So this is
Yeet.
1 green-white for a 3/2 that has Revolt, and when it enters the battlefield, if you've triggered Revolt this turn, you get to return a permanent that costs 2 or less. So like I've seen some people go like turn 1 Mana Elf, turn 2 like make some play that costs 2 and play a Strip Mine. Turn 3 Strip Mine you, play Renegade Rallier, Strip Mine you.
I got to do that to somebody on turn 2. I went Mox, Land, Elf,
Gross.
pass, turn 2, Strip Mine you, Renegade Rallier, Strip Mine you a second time.
What a
And
good
it's like
4-drop this is.
game over right there.
Yeah, you just sort of win. So there's a bunch of really powerful things that can happen with that card. But yeah, I think Knight just as often just Woolly Thokdar too. It's just big. A lot of the times, Knight of the Reliquary can just end up being this like 6/6 or 7/7 for 3,
Yeah,
which is
it
just playable.
often has the secret keyword of biggest thing on the field, which is a powerful keyword.
Very powerful.
very evergreen.
Often misread, but yeah.
One of my favorite cards actually in the green-white aggro version specifically is Surak Huntcaller. I think it's I think it's a super powerful card, especially in non-red decks, just because it gives you an effect that is often really lacking in aggressive decks that don't have red in them. It's a 2 green 5/4. It's a legendary human warrior, and it has a static ability if you have Formidable, which is if you have the creatures you have total 8 power or greater. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains haste. So you can play it pre-combat, and if you have 3 other power in play, it can give itself haste. And then on future turns, if you play a pre-combat creature, you can give that creature haste.
Yeah.
So basically, it just grants one creature you play every turn haste,
card that-
including itself,
bananas.
which is pretty nuts. And it's a 5-power 4-drop.
A card that totally goozled me that I didn't actually think was very good, but is nuts in this shell is the mono green god,
Ronus.
Ronus.
Ronus the Chonus.
So Ronus is, I'm gonna have to get that. Yeah, 3 mana 5/5 for 2 and a green, Death Touch, indestructible, and Ronus can't attack or block unless you control another creature with power 4 or greater. But then for 2 and a green, another target creature gets +2/+0 and gains trample. Trample and Death Touch is very, very, very relevant together.
It can't target itself.
Yeah, another.
Womp womp.
They thought of that one.
There was, I can't remember what happened,
You can put Rancor on this. And then
something
it's
like that happened.
Pretty.
Basically, I was playing against Noel and managed to give this creature trample, and it ruined my day.
That
I
sounds
was
like
just
a null thing to do.
Well, what I was gonna say is that the text says power 4 or greater, but really that's actually just power 2, because you can pump
Yeah.
any 2x and turn this online.
All right, let's bring it back here. What is, you think, the best matches? If you were going to come to Monday night, if you're going to come to your local Highlander tournament, what would you hope to be seen if you're going to sleeve up this deck?
Mono red.
Yeah.
You just want to play against as many mountains as possible.
All right.
You're like good against big red as well. You have like fatty creatures.
Now, why is
them
that?
is really good. You have a bunch of like good naturalizes in your deck naturally. Like you get to play Thrashing Brontodon, you get to play Reclamation Sage, you get to play Kasali Pride Mage.
And against mono red specifically, like life gain. I guess
You have
just
life
get-
gain. Your creatures are big. You're like putting big things on the board early. You're like one of the better Stoneforge decks. You're one of the better GT decks.
Do you know what mono red hates?
What?
Creatures with 4 toughness. Creatures with 3 toughness even.
Yeah.
They hate that.
Liam.
This deck's pretty good against Blue Moon as well. It's
Yeah.
one of the few decks in the format that just like inherently has a reasonable matchup against that deck. Its mana is very powerful. Like its mana is pretty good. It's reasonable at beating Platinum Empyrean, and the Blood Moons like don't matter. The only way you can really lose if they play a very conventional control game against you, where they maybe recall you a couple times and get to kind of slow you down with red removal before establishing some big threat, but generally you're pretty good against them.
And the Ravages Armageddon effects are just game over against Blue Moon.
I was getting routinely crushed by Ben Wheeler on when he was on Jeskai mid-range for a while, and I sleeved up a version of Selesnya specifically just to take him down. I was just headhunting Ben. And it was every card like Loxodon Spider with the text can't be countered, or hexproof creatures.
Yeah.
And just a lot of I want to punish counter spells and target removal. And you get a lot of incidental against like the black matchup, a lot of those cards that if you would be forced to discard it, you can put it directly into battlefield. So it had kind of an interesting matchup against like blue-black decks as well. But cards like, Witch Stalker?
Yep.
Yeah,
You know,
holy
3 mana,
moly.
3/3 for
Playing
1
Great
green.
Sable
playing
Stag.
Witch Stalker.
Great Sable Stag, just a lot of these cards that are just trying to go out of your way to make blue base players very sad. So yeah, Witch Stalker has hexproof. Whenever an opponent casts a blue or black spell, it gets +1/+1.
During your
It gets a
turn.
counter.
Yeah. Just these really interesting on curves. Same idea. Like I want to go from 1 to 3, and I want to play Hate Bears. Great Stable Stag, 1 green for 3/3, can't be countered. Protection from blue and black.
Fairies hate it
Yeah,
for
just
some reason.
neat stuff
imagine
like
why.
that. All right, you roll up. You've got Selesnya mid range. You sit down across from your opponent. What's the most oh no deck that you're seeing there? Like what do you want to dodge?
Blue-white control's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Wrath of God is very powerful against you. And in particular, that's what green-white's really trying to prey on, is people moving away from playing white-based removal, which on average is pretty good against your deck. The combo decks can also be kind of hard. You can run into wrong half of your deck problems depending on how aggressive you are. Like Voice of Resurgence and Loxodon Spider, although they're a reasonable clock, they don't do anything to stop the combo decks. But cards like Thalia and your other Hate Bears are going to be very
Mind
good.
Sensors.
Oh, yeah.
So
very good.
So in those matchups, they can be hard. You just have to mulligan intelligently, and generally that's going to make them better.
How do you feel about the matchup against mid range? Like if you sit down against another fair deck, and you just know at a certain point they're going to have more value.
I mean, it sounds like
You
it'll
think
be
you
a
can
sweet
race
hockey
it?
fight.
This deck actually is like pretty reasonable against decks like 4-color blood. I think you're probably like a slight dog, But your creatures are really resilient to like the really cheap removal. Like you're not often getting 2-for-1 off of a Forked Bolt, for example, or even an Arc Trail.
Yeah.
So like it's pretty hard to get 2-for-1 in this deck, and you still have like really good value, and your nut draws are still like insane. Just like the like really fast start into an Armageddon is hard for any deck to beat.
Yeah. All right, well, let's move on to mid-range then. So let's talk about Selesnya mid-range. Jer, what's the difference between aggro and mid-range? We're in the same colors. You've seen we've blurred the line a little bit already, but...
Yeah, so when you fully cross over into the mid-range deck, you're almost certainly not playing any of the 2-power 1-drops. You're maybe playing like Dryad Militant, maybe Kytheon, but that's really it. You really want to get like maximum value from your cards. And you're really starting to go a bit higher up the curve. You're starting to play 5-drops, like maybe Verdurous Gearhulk.
Interesting.
Lyra Dawnbringer is
Virtuous.
another good one you can play.
My first one I think about is, what's the 5/5 angel in
Sigarda.
Selesnya? Sigarda. Like Sigarda is sort of what is my flag bearer.
Yeah, she's really good. Avacyn is another
Oh yeah.
really good one.
Was it Archangel Avacyn or
Archangel Avacyn, yeah.
Yeah.
This card's insane.
Flash
and
Flying Vigilance?
Another one I've started to play in the mid-range decks is Carnage Tyrant, just due to
Oh,
the
yeah.
prevalence of blue
Yeah.
decks and the inability for them to possibly beat this card ever. Yeah, like
Cool.
it reads,
GG.
yeah, see you nerds
That's a lot.
playing
That's a lot.
islands.
Do you hate counter spells? Are you just really tilted by your rotten casual group friends beating you with counter spell? Play Carnage Tyrant and watch their smiles turn into frowns.
Another new card that the aggro deck can play, but generally hasn't yet, but the mid-range deck is much more inclined to, is Galta.
Which one?
Galta.
What is
Primal Hunger.
Primal Hunger. This is the 12/12 Trampler for 12.
Oh!
That gets cheaper for every point of power
It really
you have.
costs 2.
Yeah. And almost,
Really?
almost always. Yeah, this card's insane.
Getting
Is
10
it?
power
Yeah,
isn't
this
that hard.
card's really good. It's not that hard to cast. When we talked about this on the set review, we were like, well, it's going to depend on how easily you can cast it. You can cast it.
Huh.
And like
It's gonna be a pretty bad top deck.
Not-
when you don't have a board, sure, but other than that, it's generally pretty good. And like, you gotta think like a 12/12 Trampler, like you're kind of willing to pay upwards of 6 mana for this card. Like you do not
Oh, yeah.
need that much in play, and it like your elves do double duty for tapping for this because they often have 1 power, so they're actually tapping for 2.
Okay.
This card's really good.
Huh.
And also in green-white specifically, you're a lot better at punching through blockers because you have access to white removal. And so if they have some kind of problematic blocker like a True Name Nemesis, white is one of the few colors that's actually capable of dealing with that.
Council's
Not that Galta
judgment.
cares because it has trample, but yeah, it just lets you really punch through the damage with Galta, doesn't let them get in the way. And yeah, this card is huge.
I think another super great new tool for the mid-range deck is Shalai, Voice of Plenty. I think this card's just really, really good. It's 3 and a white for a 3/4 legendary angel with flying. You,
this card's
planeswalkers you control, and other creatures you control have Vexproof, and you can pay 6 to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. It's just like
This card's bonkers.
pile of value,
Yeah.
and it helps protect your other
Everything.
creatures.
Huh. All right, what is your ideal matchup? You're sleeving this up. You're just like, you know what? My name is Value, and I'm here to turn creatures sideways. Who are you hoping to rumble against?
The green-white aggro deck.
That is true.
You're just the bigger version.
You're
Yeah.
beating up on your little brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's true.
But like you have largely the same good matchups. Like you're slightly worse against red, but you're probably 60% against red instead of 70.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
sometimes you get clunked up with like 5 and 6 drops, but those 5 and 6 drops often just win the game against red on the spot.
I think you just have more fun with this deck because you just get to do so much powerful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you draw Baneslayer against red, I don't think they come back from that.
Well, now you get to play 2, as Matt has been loudly proclaiming throughout YJ since
yeah?
And one's a
since
6/6.
Dominaria has been legal.
And one of them what?
And
One's
one
a
of them
6/6.
6/6. Yeah, he has lived that dream.
That's really funny.
One of the things I think that you'll find with the matchups between the aggro and the mid-range version of Selesnya is that you just kind of move everything to the middle. So the mid-range Selesnya deck is like a little better against the decks that the aggro deck
Sure.
struggles against, and it's a little worse than the aggro deck against the decks they're both good against. But this deck's really good, actually. I mean, if you want to play a deck that's going to have game in a lot of matchups, there's not a ton of stuff where you feel like a big dog. This deck is worse against combo because you're oftentimes shaving some of the
Well, you're also
hit-bearers.
playing fair. You're playing like more fair magic here,
yeah,
right?
exactly. And you're oftentimes shaving some of your early clock too for bigger, splashier threats. And so sometimes you'll walk into like a Paradox Engine player and that'll be bad, or someone will monstrously have decided to put Gristlebrands into play with haste that day.
Savage.
Yeah, I don't know who would possibly do that.
Yeah, but there are actually tournaments where I think this is the best deck you can sleeve up,
absolutely.
and I've advocated that to other people.
I've had
so, like,
a very good time playing this list before.
if your meta is a lot of Blue Moon and a lot of mono red, there's not many better decks than this you can sleeve up to try to take down that tournament.
The one downside with a fair deck that has a match and everything, if you're playing a 60-40 deck, a deck that's favored in everything, if you play a 5-round tournament, you shouldn't be too disappointed if you go 3-2, because like statistically, that's what you're likely to do. So that's sort of the downside between a well-rounded deck versus a silver bullet deck. You play an 80-20 deck, if you hit all your right matches, you're just going to crush. If you bring a fair deck, you're gonna have game and everything, but they're gonna have game against you too.
Yep.
But it's a sweet deck. All right, let's move on to a very spicy archetype. Let's talk about green-white hoof. Jared, can you tell us about hoof and then what the difference is in a green-white version versus a traditional one?
So Hoof is basically the green elf-based combo deck. You're playing Natural Order for Crater Hoof Behemoth or Primeval Titan to get Dark Depths combo. Basically, You're trying to set up a board state where you can tutor for Crater Hoof Behemoth and win, or play Primeval Titan as early as turn 3 to get Dark Depths to set up a turn 5 win.
Wah, wah.
So you're primarily trying to combo in the more interactive matchups where it's just not safe to combo, or you're just realistically not going to be able to. You have a really strong mid-range backup plan with Planeswalkers. You're just playing basically all the good green Planeswalkers. Like, this is a very good Garruk Relentless deck, for example.
Yeah.
Like, you're really taking advantage of making the creatures. You're really, really, really good at getting Gaia's Cradle into play to cheat on
And
mana.
untapping Gaia's Cradle a bunch.
Yeah, you're playing cards like Voyaging Satyr, which is like primarily in the deck to untap Nykthos and Gaia's Cradle. So you're looking to cheat on mana a lot really early. Other ways to do this include Priest of Titania and Elvish Archdruid. You're also playing cards like Quirion Ranger.
Raphellos.
Oh,
Raphellos is another
solid.
one that cheats on mana.
So you basically abandoned the early and mid game and dedicated it all. I'm sorry, I mean points of the curve, not game, and made it all into ramp and payload. Like,
Well,
this is a turbo ramp combo deck.
Yeah, it's like really, really trying to get like all its early cards, like 3 and under, are either tutors or cards that produce mana, and then you actually don't have very many cards that are 4 through 6 in the deck. Like, it's very thin. Like, all those cards are like really, really good value cards, or like Natural Order Primeval Titan.
Sure.
Yeah, I've once heard Ben describe this deck as being like a hyper mana strategy.
Yeah, he's played a couple different versions. Like, there are versions that like go all in and even play like the 3-drop dorks that make 2, like Fintorn Elder and Greenweaver Druid. Those aren't typical to the deck. That's a
Ben experimenting thing.
and
Well, that was early in the deck's iterations too.
he's tried it out later as well, but
Wow, that art.
yeah.
That
Yes.
order.
So this deck is like aggro and mid range could sort of blur together, and like at one point the aggro deck might
Take this.
be a mid-range deck. At some point, the mid-range deck may be an aggro deck. There are probably like 80 cards the same. This deck is more like 40 cards the same.
Yeah, it's pretty clearly a hoof deck.
Yeah.
So what does white add to hoof? Because hoof is typically red-green.
Yeah, so typically you play red for primarily Kessig Wolfrun as a Primeval Titan target, Rurik Thar as a combo disabler, and Dragonlord Atarka as a like board cleaner upper.
And Domri Ridge.
Yeah, a couple of the green-red planeswalkers.
Yeah, you can also play
Xenagos,
Domri
the
Raid,
Reveler for extra
Xenagos,
mana.
sometimes play Huntmaster of the Fells. So that's pretty much it. And so I think if you don't have very much combo in your meta, basically the biggest attractor for me to red is getting Kessig Wolfrun off Primeval Titan and having Rurik Thar in your deck to get off Natural Order. In the green-white version, I think the best point spread doesn't actually play Natural Order anymore. You just
really?
play more fast mana. You get to play like I think the version I played last played Mox, Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, and Summoner's Pact. So you're focusing more on fast mana to just have like more nut draws because you just want to start casting 6 drops on turn 3 every game. Like
Sure, yeah, okay.
That's the best possible thing you can do. And white gets you more tutors. It gets you Eladamri's Call.
Oh, right, yeah,
Which is a really, really good card in the deck.
Yep.
Gets you Knight of the Royal Quarry, which is another way to get Guy's Cradle into play or assemble Dark Depths combo.
That's main stage, yeah.
It gets you Dragonlord Jamoka, which is an insane card against blue decks. Like, once again, it's just a card blue decks basically can't beat. And it gets you the Devoted Druid combo. You get to play Vizier of Remedies and Walking Ballista. And I think Walking Ballista is, like, one of the most criminally underplayed cards in Highlander right now. It's just, like, such an insane value card, especially in fast mana decks, where, like, if you're casting this for 3 on turn 3 in, like, the mirror, you basically just won.
Well, that was very thorough. I was going to go like, let's talk about classic cards, but I think you just really crushed it. All sort of in the definition there.
I've played this one a lot.
Yeah, no worries.
The other green-white card we haven't talked about yet that is in this deck and in the mid-range deck as well is Selvala.
Which one's that?
The one green-white
Yeah, Selvala Explorer
parlay
Return.
card. So this is the one that taps to parlay, and you each reveal the top card of your deck, and then you do some stuff associated
Selvala Explorer Return.
How
Yeah.
do you spell Selvala?
Selvala.
Yeah.
Yeah, so each player reveals the top card of his or her library. For each non-land card reveal, you add a green, and you gain a life, and then each player draws a card. So, yeah, it's just like, it's a ramp card. It helps generally in this deck. Your cards are more, like, you getting more cards is more important than your opponent having cards because you're trying to, like, accumulate velocity and kill them. And so having this in play it's kind of like they don't really want you drawing more cards because you're going to have so much mana that you're going to get to use way more cards than your opponent is. And then also this card's just like actually quite good in the more value oriented matchups. It blocks really well against the aggro decks. It does a bunch of stuff that you want of it. So this is a card that gets played in the mid-range deck, but also in this deck as well.
Speaking of green-white legendary creatures that are
Oh,
conspicuously
go
absent,
on.
we forgot to talk about Teague.
Ah, yes, Gaddock Teague.
He's really
He's going
good.
to show up in the aggro and maybe mid-range.
I don't think you can play him in the mid-range deck just because you're so reliant on Planeswalkers.
Depends on
Yeah,
the
that's true.
planeswalkers you're playing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Gaddock Teague is a 2/2 for green-white.
Gaddock.
Gaddock Teague, yeah. He makes it so that players can't cast non-creature spells with converted mana cost 4 or greater, which hits a lot of important stuff. And
Yeah.
you also can't, like, nobody can cast non-creature spells with X in their mana cost. So this shuts off virtually all planeswalkers.
Most wraths.
Most wraths. Most other, like,
Delve
huge
spells.
Mana, yeah, delve spells. All sorts of other stuff. He's low to the ground. He just, like, beats in. What are the relevant X spells that this is maybe hitting?
Green Sun Zenith.
Logic Knot, it occasionally stops your opponent.
Bonfire of the Damned.
Bonfire of the
Yeah.
Damned is the big one, probably.
High
Entreaty
Tide players
Angels.
hate him.
This card's actually beatable for High Tide, shockingly.
I was going to say, it's like, yeah.
Like,
one of
much
the-
rather play against this than Thalia.
Oh,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
fair.
Yeah. I can bounce this before I have to cast my Tendrils, but...
All right, before we open it up too much, let's get back to Hoof real quick.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what are the good matchups for Hoof? Why are you bringing Hoof over Hate Bears, over mid-range? I want to sleeve up my Savannah. I want to turn my green creature sideways.
I actually think Hoof is, in continuing on the trend,
Sure.
the green-white mid-range deck's worst matchup is Hoof. They just, like, their Hate Bears generally don't line up against
Oh,
Hoof.
right.
Like,
Yeah,
really,
okay.
they basically need to hit, like, their 2 relevant cards are Linvala, Keeper of Silence, and maybe Avid Mind Sensor, depending on the Hoof draw. But they're still probably beating Avid Mind Sensor.
That's tough, yeah.
They just, like, don't have sweepers and are slower than Hoof and smaller.
I suppose the tricky thing with Hoof is like, I want to play green-white, but I don't really want to be interactive.
No, well, yeah, you're still interacting, but just not in the same way. Like,
Yeah.
you get to be a lot more proactive with Hoof, and you're a lot more linear. You have some, like, sort of, like, sidesteppy game plans where you can drag the game out longer and play a value game if disrupted. But generally, your plan is like, I'm going to try and like dead you on turn 4 or 5 with a large angry beast.
Well, yeah, the big thing about Hoof is that, like, lots of decks aren't set up to to like effectively interact with you, so they have to be they aren't set up to beat you with their linear game plan, so they have to react to your linear game plan. Because Hoof, the deck is actually very good at not dying to creature decks.
Yeah.
Like they're just like
You got so many dorks you
not
can put in the way.
yeah, you're just not going to get aggroed on turn 4. It's not a thing that happens. So that they have to be bolting your mana creatures. So like it like forces them to react to your game plan. So if you open up your hand and you know you have like a mid-rangey draw, they don't necessarily know that. So like it can be really powerful when like you know the pace, like you're able to set the pace of the game a lot of the time with Hoof based on what your hand is
The bad
doing.
matchup to this has got to be actually control. We've probably gone full circle because the counterspells can be really disruptive, the wraths can be really disruptive, and I don't know if the clock is fast enough on Hoof to sort of get under the control deck.
It can be actually reasonable. It sort of depends. One of the things that's so powerful about Hoof is the Planeswalkers, and the fact that the deck sort of has like 3 different very powerful game plans. And as the control deck, it can be hard to keep all of those things in check. It depends on how threat dense you are. If the Hoof deck is way less threat dense than normal, like you've shaved some threats for more mana, or you're trying to be more linear and go faster, then the control deck gets to like oftentimes throw a wrench in the plans. But one of the big issues with Hoof is that for control against Hoof, there's sort of a 4th game plan you have to respect, which is that they kill you with elves. They just attack you a bunch of times, and eventually you have to react, and then they get to resolve something more impactful.
Yeah.
And also, this is one of the best decks at like starting to double spell super early. Like,
Oh yeah.
if you just have like a Sol Ring or a Mana Crypt or something like that in play, you can start double spelling, like casting 2 must counter threats starting like turn 4, and that's really hard for control decks to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, like, sometimes even you're just like, here's a big idiot counter, here's a big idiot counter, here's a big idiot, I'm out of counters.
Got him.
One
They can have it.
of the I haven't actually played this matchup, so I'm gonna have to defer to Alex on it. But one of the matchups that I sort of have theory crafted as being not great for Hoof is also Aristocrats. I don't think that matchup sounds very good either, because Hoof doesn't do a very good job of interacting with Aristocrats, and though Aristocrats doesn't do an amazing job of interacting, cards like Goblin Bombardment sound like they're just like completely game winning on their own.
Yeah, when I get that out against Hoof, it's like
You
the
definitely
color drains out of my opponent's face.
have some hosers, like Sharpshooter does basically the same type of thing.
That's going to be kind of tough.
Actually, Sharpshooter's like the really scary one. It's just like...
I mean, I guess not many. If Hoof resolves Cradle Hoof Behemoth, like the name behind the deck, there's not many decks that can survive that Alpha Strike. So it's not great to evaluate if you can survive that. It's more the build up to that point, right?
Yeah, well,
Like Aristocrats is very good against every game plan, but the hyper fast combo.
Yeah.
For like draw of Hoof.
and speaking of surviving Crater Hoof attacks, there is a pretty funny story that I'm going to relate really quickly.
Yeah,
Where
let's hear
in the
it.
mirror, 2 people were playing
Hoof mirror?
The Hoof mirror, yeah. One person successfully Crater Hoof after making a huge board, because in the mirror you have to go really
Super
big.
wide.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
because there's often just a lot of power, and people go pretty big, and it's hard to interact. So one person hoofs, goes really huge with their hoof, attacks, and then the other person makes their blocks, then taps all of their creatures and chords for their own Crater Hoof Behemoth, and then wins the combat step by doing so, and then kills someone on the crash back.
It was so savage.
Defensive Cradle Hoof Behemoth.
Oh, that's so funny.
And like
just to pump their whole team. Oh, that's so good.
It was pretty good, yeah.
So Jerry, you're saying?
Dang.
yeah, they like didn't have enough unsummoning sick creatures to attack and win with their Crater Hoof, but you can still tap summoning sick creatures to convoke, to chord. So
Oh, that's so good.
yeah.
Holy cow. All right, well, what are the bad matches? Why, if obviously if Hoof was unbeatable, everyone would play it. So why are not that many people playing it right now?
There's actually a couple of reasons. One is that I think a lot of people don't really enjoy playing the deck. That's actually a big reason why it's not as widely played as you would expect. Yeah, it's just like, it's pretty linear. The line, there's
Mana, idiot, I win.
yeah, and like there are certain players who really enjoy playing this style
Yeah.
of deck, and they do play it, but they just don't come out to every event. And if you're sort of someone who rotates through some different decks, like me or a bunch of other players, this isn't one that you're often going to go to. But the other reason is that cards like Pyroclasm, very hard
Yeah.
to beat, and this deck is actually not very good against Blue Moon. The Platinum Empyrean is randomly good against you. It's not always good against you, but it can just get you sometimes. That deck has access sometimes to Mystical Tutor for Bonfire of the Damned, which can be just totally game-ending.
You're not playing as many mid-range answers to stuff like Platinum Imperium as the mid-range. Like, you're probably not going to play as many Rex Sage-like effects, or as many O-rings, or as many removals as the mid-range version does.
And the third thing is that Hoof's mana is way less good than it seems. You do play a lot of forests, but you care about your non-basics a bunch, and so getting Blood Moon actually matters. Particularly if you're the green-white version, it can matter a lot because it shuts off Cradle, it shuts off Nykthos, it shuts off Dark Depths combo, so it means that the one of your lines of play that the control deck usually has to respect is just completely gone. So Blue Moon's a bit of a rough matchup.
And it most likely shuts you off of white spells, whereas the red deck can still obviously cast red spells under Blood Moon, because you're not in the business of playing basic planes in this deck.
Yeah, no, why would you? Like, maybe one, probably not.
You like need Birds, Caryatid, or Noble Hierarch to cast white spells at that point.
Yeah. Very interesting. We got a little bit of time. Do we want to talk more specifically just about like green-white combo? Because it exists, and we kind of touched on it as a plan B.
Sure.
But Jared, what are the combo decks you can find in Selesnya?
So it's basically just playing all the creature combos you can jam in. You're playing the Walking Ballista combo I talked about, adding into Hoof. You're playing the.
So how does that one work really quickly, just if people aren't familiar with it?
So you have Devoted Druid. You need an unsummoning sick Devoted Druid in play with a Vizier of Remedies.
Okay.
Then
what are those two cards?
Devoted Druid is 1 and a green for a 0/2. It taps to add green to your mana pool and puts a -1/-1 counter on itself to untap it.
Yeah.
Vizier of Remedies is 1 and a white for a 2/1. If one or more -1/-1 counters would be put on a creature you control, that many -1/-1 counters -1 are put on it instead.
That sounds like
so
it could
weird.
potentially be infinite.
It is infinite.
Oh.
So it when you go to put a -1/-1 counter on your Devoted Druid to untap it, instead you put that many -1 on it, which is 0. So you put 0 -1/-1 counters on your Devoted Druid to untap it, and then you do that a bunch. Then you make a bunch of green mana. Then you need to find a way to find your Walking Ballista, cast it for 1 million, and then
Get him for 500,000.
yeah, get him. That's usually enough.
Yeah, the other green-white combo that I haven't see a lot of play recently is our Archangel of Thune and Spike Feeder.
Classic.
This is another
OG.
having 2 cards in play. You don't technically win, but you do gain infinite life.
So what are the two cards?
Archangel of Thune is 3 white for a 3/4 with flying and lifelink. Whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control.
Yeah.
And Spike Feeder is 1 green for a 0/0 that enters play with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. You can move counters around, that doesn't matter. It has an ability where you can take a counter off to gain 2 life. And so when you take that counter off and you get the trigger off of Archangel, it replaces that counter. So you can just like take it off
over and over and over. Yeah.
So there's a lot of decks that can't beat infinite life, not all of them. Like Time Vault doesn't care.
And notably, it does make your creatures in play arbitrarily large.
Yeah, as well. They all
right,
get
there is that.
+1/+1s, yeah.
So you can just turn your
Crack.
Except
next
for
turn.
Spike Feeder. Spike Feeder stays
still
a
a 2/2.
1/1/2/2.
Yeah. But yeah, it's also like 2 cards that are like pretty decent on their own. Like you're not super sad to draw Spike Feeder, and you're not super sad to draw Archangel. Archangel's actually like kind of a beating on its own.
Archangel, I've won a lot of games with value Archangel. And then the other combo this deck usually plays is the classic green-white combo card, Kiki Jiki.
Oh, right, I forgot about
Right.
the old school Liam green-white
That-
Kiki.
The
This,
green
this,
Kiki.
this is definitely an ode to Liam combo. He just loves this card so much and loves beating people with it.
So how do you cast a red creature in a green-white deck?
That's not
No.
play.
You have one way to cast it. You have Vizier of the Menagerie in play.
Whoa.
I don't even play that card.
Okay, so
It was played in the version that was.
so how
that
can
was
Vizier
doing it.
cast it?
Well, it just lets you cast.
You may spend mana as though it were any type
So
to
Vizier,
cast creature
so Vizier
spells.
is a 4-mana 3/4 for 3 and a green. You may look at the top card of your library. You may cast the top card of your library if it's a creature, and you may spend mana. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the reason Kiki Jiki gets in the deck is because it wins with a really good pod chain that Liam was able to discover. If you have a 3-drop and Birthing Pod in play, you're able to win the game. You pod your
6 cards and 3 mana. 6 life and 3 mana as well.
and you need 6 life and 3 mana.
Okay.
So you spend 2 life and a mana to pod your 3-drop into Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian blinks your pod, Then you spend another mana and 2 life to pod your. I guess you need 7 life.
Yeah, strictly, you have to not die from the last
yeah.
2 life killing you.
Yeah. So then you pod Felidar Guardian into Karmic Guide.
Yeah.
And you bring back Felidar Guardian, blink your pod again. Then you pod Felidar Guardian yet again into Kiki Jiki. Then Kiki Jiki copies Karmic Guide, gets back Felidar Guardian. Felidar Guardian blinks your Kiki Jiki this time. And then Kiki Jiki cat makes infinite cats.
It's worth noting you can set up this. You don't
copycat them.
Yeah, you don't just need, or don't just have to use pod to set up this combo. You can also do it with Survival of the Fittest.
Yeah.
So if you have a bunch of mana, you can survival away your Kiki and your cat, and then you get Karmic Guide, cast Karmic Guide, get back Kiki, do the same kind of thing.
Or you can get Revel Arc.
I was
either
about
one.
to say, like, you can also hit this guy off of Court of Calling or even Eldritch Evolution.
Yep.
For sure.
Those are other ways. But
Surprisingly many ways to cast a red creature in a green white deck.
don't try to cast the Kiki. That's my advice.
Okay.
Yeah,
Now what happens if Kiki's in your hand?
You
only have survival, or you kind of goozle?
Survival. You progress to discard step. I don't know. Like there are outs
You
probably.
just casually flash it to your opponent to like put them off their game.
I like there are ways, not easy ones, I admit, but there are ways. So if the Kiki's in your hand and you're pod chaining, you are just locked, unfortunately. But you can still do the reason why this deck is good is because you can also just be a value deck.
Yeah.
You're worse than the green white mid range deck, but not that much worse actually. Like you still play a lot of the same cards. You just have also shoehorned this Kiki Jiki into your deck. And so you can do things like, value your way up, and then eventually try and find a way to discard it to win the game. You can look to pod a little slower and cast it. There's a bunch of stuff you can do, but drawing it is not good, not advised.
So it's really interesting to think of green-white as it's a very non-traditional combo shell. But in creature-based combo, a lot of the most powerful creature tutors are already in green, and white gives you some very interesting value for stuff. In particular, Eladrami's Call, and then these weird non-standard reanimate cards like Revel Arc and Karmic Guide.
Yep.
It provides interesting things, and of course, white gives you the combo pieces of. Felidar Guardian, it gives you access to Restoration Angels. Another one?
It is, though that doesn't work with the Karmic Guide line.
Oh, okay.
Because
right,
Karmic Guide is an angel and Resto can't blink it.
Sure.
So that's why this line wasn't a thing until Felidar Guardian got printed. Is because you could do it, except for since they didn't want Restoration Angels infinitely flickering each other, they made it non-angel, and Karmic Guide is problematically unangel.
Very interesting. I didn't actually think
I
about
wonder
that.
why they didn't just say another target creature. Oh, right,
Because you can have two angels forever. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So that's really the bulk of what we're hoping to talk about today. So we talked about Selesnya. We talked about green-white decks, and there's a lot of room to play in there, and hopefully we got that across. And if you've got a starter toolkit, a lot of these decks probably share a good solid amount, and we talked about some of the different directions they could take and what to play with, and I don't know, have some fun. I think this is one of the few color combinations or archetypes we've all played, which is great. I love me some green-white Stompy. I'm particularly fond of like the Skip 2 variety, but
Stop.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of my green-white triple-red decks.
All right, let us move to our traditional closing segment, Powerful Magic. And up today, we've got Jer. Jer, tell me your story.
So this is a sweet green-white story.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I was playing green-white the other day.
Okay.
I was playing against one Ben. He was playing Blue Moon. And this is a story of sweet green-white victory over Blue Moon.
Love it.
So I won the die roll and was on the play. I went land, elf, mox, pass. He played island. Then I untapped. And I played some sort of threat, I can't remember. I think I played an Aven Mind Sensor.
Oh, okay.
Then he untapped and played another island and passed. Then I untapped, hit him with my bird, played another threat. I don't think it was counterable. I think I played a Loxodon Smiter, maybe a Prowling Serpapart.
Sure. Oh.
Something. Then he untapped, played island, tapped out for Vidalcan Shackles, which is like pretty good on this board. It was like taking most of my creatures, except for then I got to untap, not even play my land yet, Ravages of War, then play my land, I still had Mox Elf land in play. He had a Vidalcan Shackles with no islands. And then he proceeded to play Mountain Sulphur Falls and then concede.
Oh,
Go to sleep.
wow. That's one way to beat Shackles, Alex.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just blow up all their lands.
They can't take your creatures if they don't have any islands.
Yeah.
200 IQ play.
That's
Get 'em.
fantastic.
Just get them.
Well, team, that's our episode for today. I hope everyone enjoyed us talking about turning creatures sideways and fairer magic. I mean, we got a little bit degenerate towards the end, but a rare episode where we talked about the simple joy found in turning creatures sideways. As always, a reminder, this is brought to you by you with your support of the Patreon at patreon.com/LoadingReadyRun. Thank you very much for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.